Welcome back to Prime Your Midlife. And today we're going quite deep into the mind. In fact, we're talking about emotional intelligence and emotional agility. And to help me with that, we've got Simon Rogers, who really focuses much of his time on helping people come to terms with emotions that might come up in the day. Simon Rogers, good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm fantastic, Chris. It's fantastic to be here and talk about something that, have a conversation about something I'm hugely passionate about.
I'm really looking forward to it, in fact, because I've done many podcasts talking about nutrition, relationships, but actually, in retrospect, not many on why the phrase midlife crisis even comes up for us. But
Mm.
before we get into that, could you just help us understand in a succinct statement, what is emotional intelligence from your perspective?
It's very wise for you to say it in a succinct way because you know me well enough. But yeah, essentially, it's understanding the emotions of ourselves and those in others. So if you can identify those in others, that's the simplest way to describe it.
Okay. Could you give us an example of a good emotional intelligent way of approaching something or a bad way of approaching something that's not particularly emotionally intelligent?
Well, the first thing is that I suppose that we'll have to kind of look at what typically happens. And most of us, um, we at least start or notice that we see ourselves as kind of physical and mental entities. And a lot of the faculties that are commoditized is, your mental resource, how you're mentally focusing. So emotions are often seen as an inconvenient reality. They pop into this emotional space and you want to bat them off. So we typically call that suppression or repression of emotions. So of course, um, the if you're repressing or suppressing, that would be seen as, I don't really like to use bad or good, but simply it's not really the most useful way to be with emotions. That I see emotions in a totally different way to that. They are something that's useful to you, but it's really an explosion of misunderstanding. So I suppose that curiosity and openness to emotions would be the good thing,
Mhm.
and the shutting down of them and repressing and suppressing would be the bad thing, if we were to put it simply.
All right. Intriguing. A few quick fire questions before we get into some more aspects of how you work with people and help people, and particularly on
Mm.
the basis that this is a midlife conversation.
Mm.
Yes or no, or maybe, or just a really short answer. Could we or can we improve our emotional intelligence?
Yes, absolutely.
And from a male and female perspective, do we have different levels of emotional intelligence?
Um, there can be in a from a certain perspective, but in essence, no.
And how would your partner answer the same question?
Well, it depends. She would say it would depend if she was wise. No, I'm kidding. Uh,
Okay. And is emotional agility the same as emotional intelligence?
in essence, no. I can expand a bit more on that if that's useful. But it's quick
Why
fire,
not?
isn't it?
Yeah.
Go
Just
on then.
expand on why agility and intelligence emotionally are different.
So the simple way to describe it is that emotional agility is probably a part of emotional intelligence, right? So it might start with noticing what you're feeling in terms of mentally labeling it, putting a language to it. But there's a deeper aspect of how you be with emotion that's not only in language. So once you become aware of that, you can see that, oh, there's a depth there. That how I'm being it, there's a bit more choice. There's wiggle room there. And that would be starting to go into the realms of emotional agility.
So is it something associated with the more agile you are, the quicker you can come to terms with your emotional reaction to something? Is that fair, or am I insulting you
Yeah,
completely there?
no, that's probably not a bad way of describing it. I mean, emotions like an explosion of misunderstanding,
Hmm.
right? So if you have, let's say, typically we do suppress and repress emotions. So there is a backlog of emotional wounds or traumas or just things that you haven't taken the time to understand in yourself and therefore understand yourself. So um, you're going to have to allow room for them to come up. So the angle of the question typically means like everything's solved, everything's sorting, and then you're like, what's fresh coming up now? But actually we've got this constant flow of stuff we've either not faced or we have faced, and to a degree, and what's constantly coming up now. So you can't really take it in isolation. But emotional agility is that holding space for yourself for past experiences and the present. And I suppose the better you are, the more agile you are, the more you're holding space for all of that, and the less explosive and reactive it is. And so the clearer it is to understand yourself and make clear choices for yourself. Does that answer?
I'm feeling like a car on a starting grid here, because I've got lots of questions that are coming up about midlife, and I'm desperate to get into them, but I do want to frame the context of the subject before we get into that. But as we get older, are we better at having emotional intelligence associated with our reactions to environments or people?
It depends. I mean, is it available to you as you get older? Absolutely. Are you better at it as you're older? Not necessarily. There's active choice of will involved in it as well. It's just not just the capacity that you have from like a neuroscience perspective. Of course, certain ages, self-awareness is just more possible because of the neurocircuitry that you have in your brain and in your nervous system, but not necessarily that it's innately more available to you as you get older. Yeah.
Okay. And what about the people that we spend time with? Can that make our emotional intelligence better, worse, or no impact?
Well, it affects the environment that the emotional intelligence has to function in, right? So there's still your own capacity to choose and to notice, irrespective of what environment you're in. But it can become more challenging or easier depending on the environment, and that includes the people that you surround yourself with.
And if we're in high stress, high pressure, high burnout by way of just pushing the candle too hard, can that affect our emotional agility?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because of course, if you are heading towards burnout, typically, well, let's put it this way, let's start the other side, is if you are feeling light, peaceful, enjoying your life, there's this inner guidance that you've been following. You've made decisions, you've made steps, you said no to things, you said yes to things, whereby you're at a stage where you go, wow, okay, that I'm enjoying the experience of my life. Now, burnout isn't in itself like a bad thing, but there are signals coming from your body, which is where emotions are held if they're not felt, that sometimes we run away from. And I'm not saying this isn't the case all the time, but that can lead to then I just keep doing what I do, but actually it's not feeding my soul, it's not really lighting me up, so I get drained of energy. And so you're at a point there where you go, oh my goodness, what do I listen to? So yes, if you are in burnout, probably you haven't been listening, you haven't been acknowledging your emotions as much as you could do. There's no shoulds, there's no need to add guilt into it, or difficult as it is. You're burnt out. But that kind of way to slow down and stop and to notice what you're feeling, absolutely essential. Absolutely. So very difficult. You've created a pressure situation.
All right. Lots there to come back to. But overall, Simon, why do you do what you do?
I think in essence, like, I think nobody knows why we're here, what the meaning of our life is. When you come into it, it's a bit like just figuring out. You land splat here, and then you grow up and you start to become more self-aware, and then you ask like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? So first of all, it would be to understands the world that I live in and who I am and what the meaning of this experience is. And you almost like be like practically, look after yourself, like care about the experience and the opportunity you have. So that would be number one. But then in understanding myself, I realized that I deeply care about other people and I want to be able to share and I want to be able to, and that lights me up. That's what I've learned about myself, is that it's not, it goes kind of beyond a emotional needs, because I've worked in medical care and all sorts of things and observed myself and self-reflected. But I realized, no, it's absolutely, if I choose, if I have one life here and this is the time that I have, I want to make sure I enjoy it. And part of
Mm.
the honest part of that is I love being able to thrive myself, in really be honest with myself, be true to myself. And that means working with people, working closely with people, assisting them with their path. Because for me, there's nothing better than somebody making a turn towards really loving being themselves, enjoying being themselves, because there's a massive ripple effect of that as well. Just the pure joy of that happening. But people in that state, naturally they go on to support other people, not because they
Mm.
should or must, but simply because it brings them joy as well.
100%. One of my values is joy, actually, in terms of both feeling it and also enabling others to hopefully experience it. So I love that word. I'm curious, though, when you talk about that, of you love bringing value to others,
Yes.
was there a particular situation or a person or a circumstance that just made you think, hang on a minute, this is so thought-provoking for me as to
Mm.
what's just happened there, that made you then change the course of your own journey of career or business?
There's many, and there's been some that's been like a moment in time. I think one of the things that, and I don't talk about this too often openly, is I had an experience that I can only really call spiritual when I was about 11 years old. And I don't hold any religious beliefs at all. I'm just open to how things are, and I want to figure out how on earth do I navigate this experience of life. So I just remember at 10 years old, I was asking myself, who am I? That seemed the most useful question, almost like a identity crisis, absolutely. But it wasn't like a little play. It was essential for me. It was absolutely essential. It was a calling to go, I don't understand this and I can't talk to anybody about it, because I'm from a very loving family, also a very traditional family. And at the time I felt like, who do I even talk about this with? Because it feels like I am uh, deeply I don't belong. And one of the big triggers for me was football. I felt I was too sensitive. I loved playing the game, but I just didn't understand, like, how do I fit and belong with the culture of everything there. And I thought, oh, I need to be a certain person. So it was creating this kind of identity crisis in me. And I took that really seriously. It was at it was a very heart of me. And so I looked in the mirror and I looked straight into one of my eyes. And I think it's not an idea I got from it, it's just instinct. I was staring there and I just, like, with instinct said, "Who are you?" Like, in my mind. And I had this experience that I can only just describe. And it was simply where my face was, I didn't see my face anymore. I saw somebody else's, or what seemed like somebody else's, but it felt like me. So I was getting this reflection of a feeling of me and a different reflection coming back. So that's strange, because surely that's just the same. And the next mark, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. But it was like women, it was children, it was men, it was different colored skin, different background. And I don't know how many I saw, but the last one flicked away. And I had this feeling of me. It was like coming back to me. And it was so simple, so easy, so free, so peaceful. And at that point, I saw my reflection come back, and I was like, and obviously I'm a 10-year-old boy and I'm in my life. And I thought, how do I share this with anybody? And I thought, I can't, I don't know how to, I don't have the language, didn't understand the experience myself. I couldn't put it into words like I'm doing now. So I didn't even have the means to share it. So I held that as a deep truth for myself. Like, there's something in this, because it felt more real in many ways than everything I experienced before. So got this deep truth of my being, and I didn't know, a concept or an idea to put that into, but it felt like I am an expression, an energy, a feeling. That's the truest version of me, and I can choose how much I show up into this personality that I am, this body and this reflection, right? That was very clear to me. And then I go on. So there's a split that happens at about 10. That was a massive, massive realization for me.
At
And
age 10.
yeah, yeah.
No, sorry, we're going to get to how long you then spent before you got to that
Mm,
point. But it reminds me of a conversation I had just with my son
mm,
last week. He's 15, and he sat me down and he said, "Dad, I've got a problem." And I'm thinking, okay, right. And he said, "I keep on having these sort of flashbacks and dreams, and some of
yeah.
them are repetitive, and I have what I think I've experienced something, and then it comes true, and I think it's
Mm,
called a deja vu." And I'm sure he's not going to listen to this podcast. So I kind of sat with it for a while, and I said, "Is it what's it making you feel?" He says, "Well, I'm worried. I think I'm a bit mad." So I then just sort of had to try to break down the
mm,
way that his brain is developing and it's
mm,
changing, and it's also he's got something called the self-conscious thought process that is
mm,
there to help him and also to remind him of what's going on, and just unpacking the thoughts
mm,
for him and making him understand that it's very normal and it's something that will happen, and to be aware of it, and I guess you would say emotionally aware of it,
mm.
is a really good habit to have. But you, age 10, having this thought process of who am I, did you express that to anybody, or did you suppress it by way of vulnerability?
Yeah, I think I would have suppressed it. I mean, essentially, I didn't talk about it. I didn't say like, "Oh, I'm really struggling with this." It was, very kind of behind the scenes, and I wouldn't even said, "Oh, I'm struggling with it." It was just the experience. It was just the experience. So none of this was really verbalized. It was simply a case of, "Oh, really passionate about this, but it feels like I have to be different." And well, how far am I willing to go with this? And when do I say no? And so so this seemed like a way of discovery, exploration, and I had no idea, what was going to happen. And you know, in many ways, I've never recreated that same experience since, right? So, in many ways, it's just kind of a grace. It was just a moment of a message, an experience that at that time I just deeply trusted it because it was
Mhm.
so profound for me. So much so that I thought, oh, there's nothing out there in society from my perspective that's going to help me understand this. There was a deeper trust in my inner experience than there was in the external. And I have a, incredibly loving, supportive family. So, you know, that in itself is maybe a bit strange, but that was the reality. That was the experience that was true for me.
Mm. I'm going to come back in a minute just
Sure.
to talk about how your two tracks then sort of went
Mm,
in different directions. But rolling forward to maybe 30 years time or 20 years time, and a midlife person looking in the mirror and the same thought process coming back to them, to going, who am I? Where am I? Where am I going?
mm,
Can you see any similarity between
mm,
the same thought processes? And if that is coming up for somebody right now, what should they do about that sudden feeling of conflict between
mm,
where they've come from and where they see themselves going?
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the tools that I've developed and insights are for that purpose because that just to allow things to come up, trust emotions, build a relationship with them. That maybe one kind of useful pointer is that emotions are a bit like your children, but there are deeper feelings that are more like your teachers. So you have to kind of nurture those children to listen to your teachers, because otherwise they'll take all your attention. And that's practice, that's skill sets that you'd have to learn to do, because let's be fair, you know, certainly living in the UK, and I've lived in other countries, particularly in Holland, there are different cultures, and some of them teach you, guide you, encourage you to repress your emotions more than others. And I think it's fair to say that it's typically more common to repress your emotions in the UK than it would be in a lot of other countries. The stiff upper lip kind of syndrome, if you like, and it's quite a lot of national pride in that. Almost the resilience comes from that, but it's only an aspect of resilience, right? And so sometimes we're a little bit too rigid with that. So yeah, so to learn how to be with those emotions, you know, I think we can be a lot more curious about it. So and hopefully we're going to share more and more insights, skills and techniques to do that.
But listen to that about kind of being aware of your teachers. What if you confront the fact that what you've been taught by way of societal norm or expectations, or even family expectations of where you're going to go on your path? What happens if you suddenly confront those teachings to say, actually, that's not in line with what Simon wants? How do you lean into that?
Yeah, I personally found that quite challenging. You know, I've genuinely, as I said, I've come from a loving and supportive family. So just by pushing back on that, you know, the instinct that comes up is like, oh, well, you don't appreciate what you have, or it's not enough for you, or whatever, you know, whatever story that comes up. But essentially, I think you have to realize that true happiness is individual, and it's your joy, your version of joy and feeling joy. It requires you to be open to your experience, which is an inside job, not an external one, however loving and supportive an environment is. And also every experience is somebody doing the best with the resources they have, but it doesn't mean that it's everything for you, right? It's not somebody else's responsibility to create and facilitate your happiness. You know, it's like I said, it's an inside job. So it's not a case of that's not good, this is right. It's more of a case of, no, how do I understand, now I look at it in the context that I'm in, and then, you know, looking at it in almost like a, I suppose, non-judgmental, curious and open way.
So back to your two paths, and I'm going to try to draw a similarity between perhaps somebody now that's at the crossroads or on a bit of a roundabout of life, wondering what exit to take. You're pursuing your two tracks, as you termed it, and at some stage, I assume that you decided that actually this path isn't the one I'm backing myself for the future. How long did it take you to decide, and how did you feel while you were not congruent perhaps with where you felt your destiny was? So first of all, how long did you sit with the two paths side by side with each other?
A long time, a long time. It's only been in the last few years that that's kind of, I would say they converge rather than let go of one path. It's more of a case of allowing them to converge, because like I said, from that point of perspective, I could choose how much I show up or not. I could still perform at a high level at lots of things, but I could modulate how much. Like I really would show up. I'd really make sure that I was backing it, and I, you know, full of heart, mind, and soul, you know, and so I was learning, but it created this kind of inner resilience, because I was almost impervious. I'd still experience things and it would be painful and challenging or wonderful, but there's this ability to feel it deeply, but it wouldn't absolutely kill me, right? So I think, you know, in hindsight, you look at it and you go, well, actually, it's just exactly the way it needed to be. Right? With that kind of you start really self-acceptance has been the part that's brought it together. So accept, you know, the very kind of, I suppose, like the humanness of us, and how then, and the unique circumstance that we're in, and to embrace it and to bring your very best that you have to offer in that, And it's a level of trust and commitment and faith and openness and vulnerability, and how much that so that's only been really the last few years, and I would say that will deepen and continue. I don't see that, no, I've now arrived I'm complete and whole. I'd say that that's absolutely still a process, but I know that that's absolutely essential. If
Mm.
I'm true to being of any help to anybody else, I have to I have to do that for myself first. And if I'm really honest, that is what's most important to me, which is kind of different to what I was told kind of growing up as well, which is another one of those things pushing back on it. Got to put my granddad used to say, always put yourself first. And I always thought, no, no, no. What are you talking about, granddad? Don't tell me that. Like, putting myself first. What do you mean by that? And it kind of stuck in my head. And it was his way of saying, you've got to really love yourself. You've got to enjoy this opportunity of your life. And through that, you will truly be of service to other people. And it starts with you putting yourself first.
Mm.
It still rings in my ears.
And that's a really curious question when it
Mm,
comes to midlife, because there's this very clear awareness now that actually the life going forward could be less than the life that we've experienced, and therefore
mm,
self-loving the future
mm,
journey is vital. However, it also was almost selfish, because there are now more
right.
people depending on you and your role as both a father, a son,
Mm,
perhaps even a grandfather we're moving into. And you're saying, but I'm going to change things,
mm,
and this has consequences.
mm,
However, in the spirit of self-love that you just talked
mm,
about,
mm,
ignoring it could have major implications to our own self-esteem.
mm,
So I think your grandfather was absolutely bang on with that salutary sort of lesson
mm,
of sageness, of reflection. When you were, now that you talk about giving joy to people, if
mm,
you're writing a letter to younger Simon, age 10 or 15, knowing what you know now, do you
mm,
feel any regret that you haven't transgressed to this new path of
mm.
serving people? Or do you feel as though the paths have come together in a serendipitous way of serving joy to people?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think part of the self-acceptance is to accept your path and your journey, and the act of that you don't control things with your will. There's, from my perspective, things have happened. I can have intent about things, and I can have what I want and don't want, but you know, I usually get what I need, to develop and become more self-aware and to enjoy genuinely as I am. um, I get those experiences more and more and more. And I can push back on them. I can use my will. Go, no, I'm staying here. I'm sticking with it. But uh, I don't think that I could have planned it better. I don't think I can go now. I can be a master architect and go back and go, I'm going to whisper in the ear of 10-year-old Simon from my
Mm.
perspective. And necessarily, I think the journey itself is not really separate from it.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't necessarily have any regrets. And I think that, of course, you can learn from things quicker in on the level of, making choices, but the deeper understanding of who you are and being at peace with that, I think, is actually more important than the circumstance that brings it about. You
And
truly
how did you come to terms with that will that you've got, that strength of saying, no, I'm quite
Mm.
happy to stay here? Was it at sometimes that you didn't go with that path and then you felt you compromised yourself? Or did you always have this sort of stoic, no, Simon's going to stick here until such time as somebody else decides that they're wrong? Talk to me about that.
I don't know if it's. I think that to a strong degree, I've had this stubbornness kind of built in as long as I can remember. But it's not necessarily uh, a righteousness against others. It's more of a no, I'm gonna stay here until I figure out myself, almost kind of thing, right? So which seems kind of strange, but I have a way of being able to push back um, to do that. And I think, that experience I had as a 10-year-old, gave me access to that, to really push back and almost be almost idealistic and really, in a way, a little bit detached. But obviously, over a period of time, I have a balance of the other value is responsibility. So you can see how they're, pulling you back to go, well, things and circumstances are going away. So, one of the biggest things that brings me into the present is emotions, because they're showing up in the moment. And to be able to notice them, learn from them, navigate them, I have to be present, which, yeah, is very important to me.
Well, you were demonstrating, I think, just in terms of the way you're talking, is that you're clearly a deep thinker, and you are good at spending time reflecting. But taking that into
Mm,
a person that might be listening that is
mm,
at whatever point in life, but obviously I talk about midlife,
mhm,
and they're just feeling a little bit twitchy or anxious or just not certain.
mm,
How do they apply emotional intelligence to
mm,
that dot in their
mm,
life to say, this is a black spot right now that I'm
mm,
just not comfortable with?
mm.
What's the emotional intelligent way of approaching that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if it's like a general thing, usually it's because there is a collection of circumstances, right? And it's easier if it's not clear to kind of run away from them, and that's almost easier thing to do. It's a default thing to do. But I think, to be present and apply emotional agility, and to know that you can actually let go of that. You feel a peace on the other side of it is important message. You've got to isolate one of them. Just pause for a moment and isolate one of them. Isolate those thoughts. And beneath the thoughts will always be an emotion that's anchored to it. And the emotion isn't just simply in a word or anger. That's it, done. I'll go back to the thoughts. It's a sensational experience that's unfolding in your body.
Mm.
Sensational experience. It's not actually language. So if you're being with the emotion, what you need to do is to isolate the thoughts. Notice what it's distracting you from, being that sensational experience in your body. So you see the awareness has got to be able to be kind of diffuse, to be able to zoom out, not just zoom in, zoom out, and stay with it. So I have a process called face it, isolate the thoughts, face the emotion, feel it, so stay with it. It's the emotional agility. How are you being with it, not just labeling it, and let it go as a third phase. That's not really an active phase, though. Really, ultimately, that is stay with it until it dissolves. You stay with it and you notice it, and that's a part that takes some training. For example, in meditation, you notice things changing and you allow them to change. Ultimately, you never not allow them, but you notice, oh, circumstances are just unfolding. You notice sensational experiences unfolding in your body. You might notice thoughts just floating. And that's what you do until you actually understand it. But it's not an understanding of, oh, so this happened and that caused that reaction and this is why, necessarily. Sometimes it is. It's like super clear. Sometimes it's just a feeling of, I just like feel a deep sense of peace about it. I feel absolutely, now I understand myself. There's an understanding of myself that I can't put into words. So that acceptance, that self-acceptance that's happened in that is something that now goes, the thoughts that originally came up that were creating that feeling of anxiety, they've gone. They've gone, completely gone. And suddenly there's this headspace that opens up. Another one might pop up, of course, and you can start the process again. But then you've got to start the process of isolating. Start the process of isolating, which is a practice in itself. Take some skill sets to isolate,
Mm.
because you have to notice that the thousands, tens of thousands of thoughts that go through your head every single day, and stop one of them, right? Which is a skill set in itself. We can break that down as well, but you do have to start there, from my
And
perspective.
what kind of questions or techniques do you use in your own
Mm,
makeup to
mm,
face it? It sounds, it's a lovely framework. Face it,
mm.
feed it, let it go. Uh, but the simplicity is almost too simple, and
Yeah.
therefore, could you help us understand or things that we could do just to face into that thought.
Yeah.
But is it true that thoughts creates feelings and then feelings creates actions, or do you think feelings come first before thoughts? What are your...
Well, it's difficult because people use different words interchangeably. So, I mean, there's a difference between emotion and feelings, right? And again, words can be used interchangeably. But for the context of our conversation, let's say, you know, emotions are like explosions of misunderstanding in your body, right? And then they can be labeled in language as sadness, happiness, etc., right? And there's feelings that there's a deeper kind of guidance beneath that. There's a feeling of I do this or I don't that, or I lean into this, or I feel like joy, for example, is more of a feeling than it is emotion, because it just comes out of the blue and it's not a response to something external. It's more of an inner guidance, right? So there's a subtle difference between the two, but there's this distinction between the two. And so then if we're talking about emotions, yes, there will be something external to you that can come out of your subconscious, but something in your external environment is triggering, something is drawing your attention to it. And then the skill set is to be aware that it's an inner experience that's exploding, and it's an explosion of misunderstanding. So you've got to notice that inner and outer simultaneously, right? Which isn't easy to do, because it's easier to go and just react and vent and project it into the situation and make assumptions, and your mind goes really quickly, because that's what it does, you know. But the thing is to stay calm, and what helps you stay calm, to stay present, to notice both simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got to manage emotions and to have that emotional agility, emotional intelligence, and use that interaction. You've got to slow down a little bit. One of the things that really does that for me, and I work with clients on this, is consciously breathing. You know, consciously breathing in the moment. There's also proactive things that you can do to train the accessibility of that calmness and a peace of mind there. You know, meditation, for example, or just being more in nature, doing things that generally help you with your well-being. But the conscious breathing is something that's so simple, and it's so obvious, because it's simply noticing what's happening in your body, and that in your body is where the emotion is presenting itself. So you're being present as early as possible, as quickly as possible, with where the explosion's happening. So you know
Well,
it's there, not out here, right?
however many people are listening, they're all saying, that's great. What is consciously breathing then? Help us explain what to do there.
But there's loads of different techniques, but essentially your awareness has to be in your body, that you're noticing sensations. Most of us are used to being present with thought the whole time, right? So it's just content and not even aware most of the time. And I catch myself very often go, oh, I've just drifted off into a daydream. So what you would do, for example, in many ways to do it, is you start to just notice how your diaphragm is moving, so the muscle beneath your lungs. You just notice it, and you just stay there. And you say, just stay there, Simon. Okay. And your thought goes off, that's fine. Okay, just okay. When you notice it goes back to something, oh, just daydream, bring it back again. And you're practicing each time. You're training your awareness, because that's different to thinking. Awareness is different to thinking. To come back to your body and notice the circumstances that are arising, and not to instantly label them, because the first part of emotional intelligence typically is, this is what I'm feeling, or just, why am I feeling what I'm feeling, very quickly to go back to the mental space for whatever reason. I need to be more productive, guilt feeling, whatever it is, I need to be back here because this is what this is me, this is what I'm comfortable with, or this is what is needed of me, or all sorts of stories. So it's allowing yourself to feel that a little bit of discomfort of not knowing, and going into how's it feel, not necessarily in language, just the sensational experience, and staying there. So it's quite hard to do. You can't stay there if you don't breathe. Most people hold their breath instantly. you know, when you get, it's a bit like a whole cold shower, you know. And I do open water swimming every week for the same reason, to train myself. It's not really about swimming, it's just being in the cold all that time. And so the sensation is constantly around here. So if I think about something, you know, naturally my thoughts resist that experience, and it
Yes.
feels colder than it actually is. Or let's say I suffer more, I have more resistance to the experience that I'm in. Of course, I can choose to get out of the water, but there's a part of me that goes, no, 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 I'm staying here because I'm learning from this. I'm developing these skills, so this is good for me and it's working. And I don't have to keep telling myself that. I let go of that and I go into, and I stay in the experience, and I stay breathing, I stay breathing, stay breathing, and I'm still here. And then I notice points of the deeper feelings come out, because I'm calm with the emotions. The emotional response is not exploding out of me. I can understand them, understand that there are emotions that want to get out of the water and want to be on the, you know, over there. That lives inside of me all the time. But I have that perspective to be able to go, I know these are like my children. I'm nurturing, how I'm being with my emotions is like how I try and be with my little boy Milo. You know, gentle with him, understand the needs, and so yeah. Does that kind of make sense? I know I'm going off
It
a
does. I'm
tangent.
just thinking about going to the pub on Friday, and I'm sitting down with my mates with my beer, and they said, "Oh, you're looking really happy, Chris." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying this conscious breathing stuff, you know, just to keep."
Yeah,
What's going to happen then in terms of that actual process of you know, being an open man, being
yeah,
vulnerable,
yeah,
being
yeah,
transparent about what I'm trying to do to come to terms with my self
yeah,
acceptance, and they'll go, "Are you what? You do what, mate?"
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, I'm usually walking in with my yoga stuff on, so no, I'm just kidding. Um, no, I totally understand that. I mean, that's for me. That's a case of, you know, before, more and more, I would have molded in. I would have been the chameleon and gone like, okay, yeah, mate, I'll be cheers or whatever, and just talk about something else. But I think there's no answer for everybody. But essentially, I think if you really want to enjoy being you, then you've got to be honest with yourself. I'm not telling you what your truth is. I'm just saying that, you know, more and more, I either don't put myself in that situation, or I just be honest, like with how I see it. And then somebody might go, "Oh, that's a bit deep and a bit serious and a bit fluffy or a bit vulnerable or a bit that." But, you know, I want to have deep and meaningful relationships with people. That matters to me.
Mm,
And I don't judge if you want to talk about like something that's more kind of um you know, light, and there's a place for it and there's a time for it, you know. Talking like this, I love doing it and I can do it all day long, and you know, that's one of the reasons I do what I do. It doesn't take energy away from me. But I appreciate that's not for everybody. um but if you are struggling with direction and purpose and meaning, then then this is coming at you. And I'm not going to say it's wrong or it's bad or this is good or right. It's a case of emotions aren't there to torture you. And
mhm.
so I think everybody's learning to be a bit lighter with them, a bit more playful with them, take them seriously in a sense of, you know, prioritizing, and knowing that if you don't do that, it leads to other problems, mental health challenges, for example, physical issues as well. I mean, I worked for more than a decade studying the body, and noticing how much, even from a very medical point of view, and I had to acknowledge, wow, emotions are a huge drive to a lot of physical complaints, particularly for the long-standing ones.
Mm,
So
yeah.
repressing and suppressing emotions has so many effects that people don't want, and then you can then put vices on top of that, you know, alcohol, watching football, whatever it can be, whatever is a vice for you, right?
Yeah.
To not face that. I'm not saying it's bad or wrong, just saying that it's common, and it's there's choice, and you choose.
Well, there's also choice about the people that you spend your time with. And if
Yep.
you're being vulnerable and transparent about how you're trying to fix yourself, and those
Sure.
people then are mocking of your own journey, then what does it actually tell you about some of the people that you're spending your time with?
be the conclusion you come to. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, everybody's not fixed. You know, sometimes there's an amazing conversation you have in the pub that you just don't know and you don't expect, and that's that vulnerability side of things, not knowing. It's very
Yeah.
similar to doing the conscious breathing in many ways, right? The more you become, say, comfortable with the uncomfortable, but you just become willing not to know everything, and to trust a bit of direction, and not be afraid of your emotions as much.
Mm.
You know that.
Just coming back to that model of face it, feel it, let it go,
Yeah.
which is absolutely perfect. However, when the thoughts keep coming back up again, like
Mm,
a roundabout, and the car just keeps coming back to the same point,
mm,
and you say, Simon, I'm really trying in my conscious breathing, but this thought just keeps coming back and back, and I'm
mm,
trying all your techniques, but there's just something calling me to take action,
mm.
to change, to do
Yes.
something.
Yes.
What do you advise, or how do you work with that when the thoughts are so strong to say,
Mm,
I cannot get this out of my head,
mm.
and it's beginning to really get me down, that it just keeps coming up?
And usually at that stage, it's a case of a clear clarity. There's a difference between that thoughts and the thoughts that were just clogging things up right now. So now it's probably the case, and you check it yourself, that you've actually gone and you've applied that emotional agility and you've got that feeling, and the feeling now, the feeling that's deeper than the emotions, is now translated into language, and then it's showing up as a thought, right? Because everything starts from in our body, comes through us, and then comes up to our mental space as the last point that we actually understand it. So
Mm.
it's quite possible that you've gone through that process of, like, and there's a clarity there that's asking you to act on it, right? Because this is right for you. Now, sometimes we overthink that, because that guidance, you can't always go, oh yes, oh my goodness. There's consequences to taking action, that thought. But if it's truly coming from that place, it will work out. It really will work out. And that's the part that, if you're used to kind of thinking things through only logically, and you're used to being in that mental space, you're not used to being the emotions, you're not used to being, letting those feelings come through, then it's hard, it's tough, because it really feels like a massive leap of faith. You're
Mm.
you're just like, it's not even coming from anybody else. There's no kind of validation from other people, from their perspective. They might just go, well, if you really believe it, then go for it. Then if they, maybe really supportive, or I believe in you. If you really think this is great, but sometimes people might doubt that. So, I think at that point, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's act on it, take the action, do it.
Yes, because as you said previously, not going with those thoughts and then
Mm,
suppressing them can lead to other consequences in the body,
mm,
and also into the people that you are working with, or that depend on you. You've obviously got lots of success stories, and I'm going to ask you to sort of go through that virtual filing cabinet of your mind and think about some of those young boys that you've worked
mm,
with, or young children you've worked with in football, or even the adults you're working with. Without naming a name, could you give us an example of, from adversity to triumph, of
mm,
when somebody came to you with a lack of being able to feel it, face it,
mm,
and move on,
mm,
and equally now where they are in a more joyful position?
mm. Yeah, I mean, there's been some incredible journeys that I've really fortunate to witness. I can think of, um, somebody who I worked with, actually, for probably the longest I've worked with, which was 3 years. When I first met her, she was, let's give you an idea, she's about 40, and she'd been chronically depressed for a long time, and had a very high dosage of antidepressants. And she it's funny, because the first time I met her and had a session with her, she was incredibly open. She's incredibly open about the challenge. She felt that she just trusted her instinct, and she said it. And um, she told me she had a do not resuscitate order, and she said that, that she's got a daughter who was about 18 at the time, and said that, you know, deep down, the kind of story she had, and she didn't want to admit to herself, but she kept it to herself, was, if once my daughter gets into university, I don't need to be here anymore. She wouldn't actively seek then suicide, for example, but she was, that was absolutely kind of her story of like how she was believing her life would fold out. It was like everything was too much. It was constantly overwhelming. It was too painful. And you know, she the best thing for would be if she passed by the, and she thought, well, I can kind of, I don't feel guilty if my daughter's got to university. That's the story she kind of sold to herself. So that was the start point, and she said that in the first session. Okay, so yeah, so at that point, this is what she shared with me. And we, as I said, we worked together for 3 years at the point where um, I wanted to be very clear with her that, you know, the only way this is really going to work for us to work together is that she's going to be doing it. She has to. And of course, that's not really what we spoke about straight away. It was diving into support, but it was very, very quickly supporting with her when she was aware of it, that, you know, at a certain point, she would not need to cling to the work that we were doing, and that she would find it in herself. And it's wonderful because only really, like, one of the reasons I'm telling this story seems like 3 years ago is only, let's say, 3 months ago, she ended the treatment herself. She said to me, and I was prompting her prior to it to say that she's ready to let go of it, and she really trusts herself, and she's got all the tools, and she's got the what she needs from this to know that she's in a fantastic place. And and so, you know, it's been an incredible journey, the longest I've worked with a client, but in some ways, you know, just a incredible transformation that is beautifully sustainable, you know, because it's always been about that development of her self-awareness right from the very start, but using the tools that we've spoken about, and implementing them time and time again, so that it's something that she does. We So she will face it, feel it, let it go each time, and she'll, that's something that's overwhelming her. She might, before, she might have talked about it to create the context of it, but now she knows, isolate the thoughts, and I can do it in the moment. I can do it with my eyes open. I can do it while I'm having conversations with somebody. I can breathe. I can feel myself letting go, and oh, right. And then she'll learn about, oh, how did this come about? How I was reacting to this. Oh, right, I can change the whole context of how I'm approaching this part of my life, and it becomes a broader part and a broader part and a broader part, to a point where she goes, yeah, I've got this. I've got this, Simon. I'll see you later.
I could see from your statement of intent there that she clearly has got this, and you're almost kind of, okay, great, my work is done. There's a beautiful sentence I heard you use in another podcast that I listened to you,
Mm,
and it was, your humility has to be more than your ability.
mm,
And I think it related more to children in
mm,
football
mm,
academy. But I thought it was also very applicable to all parts of life. Could you help us describe more about that sentence?
mm.
Your humility has to be more than your ability.
Yeah, I mean, it's that staying humble means to be open and curious. You know, the way I see it in that context is, you can be proud of what you're achieving and what you're doing, but remember that everything changes. Nothing stays the same, and you know that there's although it's nothing, pride gets a really bad rap, really, but it's so much better than apathy. It's better than fear, in terms of awareness of what you're feeling. We kind of transcend through those, and to be proud of something's fantastic, but beyond that, you can be more courageous, and you can, there's other levels. So there's that humility to stay open and stay curious, to allow things to be more um, than they currently are. I think is really important, because it's the hidden thing is the identity part. It's so easy to draw things in, circumstances, achievements, events, to define who we are. And the more we do that, the more that gets clogged up, the less agility that you have, the less humility that you have, right? You're selling off your humility for the cost of fixing down who you are and how you want to be seen.
So to make that real, let's just say, we finished this podcast and somebody emails you to say, oh, Simon, that was such a great conversation. I really took a lot away from it. And you're clearly showing your ability to be able to communicate your message. How would you show humility in that example of where somebody's clearly massaged your ego or made you feel proud?
Well, essentially, I'd ask like, what's the, how might I thank you very much for the compliment, of course, thank you, that's brilliant. But the first thing is like, oh, how come they're sending me that message? Like, how you doing? Is there anything you want us to talk about or anything? So I'd always look at the opportunity of how you be of service. Right. And it doesn't mean that's what they want, because it's yes, no, but I'd always extend the invitation just to have a further conversation rather than simply to accept the compliment and off I go. You see what I mean?
Well, that gives me a very nice opportunity for you to tell people how you could be of service to them. So I'll put the details in your show notes, but you've obviously got a website. And from that website, I guess we can find you quite easily. Your mobile's on there, your email's on there.
Yes, absolutely. Best place to contact me. Yeah.
Okay. And if we are, we're in a world where sometimes we're very privileged, if they're not in a position where they can work with an individual and a coach, what would be your 3 fundamentals for living a good life, midlife, or whatever point somebody might find themselves in listening to this? What would be Simon's takeaway to say, do these 3 things and actually you can face it, feel it, and let it go?
I mean, so many, but I'll condense it to this. I think number 1, be present. Be present. Allow yourself to focus. Number 2 would be make the best choices that you can at the time. Just make the best choices you can at the time. And a 3rd probably encapsulates all of it. And a big part of my message is enjoy being yourself. Enjoy it.
That's very good. It's very good. To be present, make good choices, and by doing that, just enjoy being you, because you are unique. There is only one Simon Rogers.
Absolutely. And that's true for everybody, isn't it? There's a unique way that you work. And the more I work with people, I have such a privilege to get to know people. And this is quite strange. It's almost like inserting myself in a situation. I'm very mindful of doing that when I'm working with clients in a coaching way, because they need to understand their own thought stream and how they're feeling. What I put in there is sometimes a distraction, so I have to be very conscious anything that I put in there. So yes, enjoy being you. It's very unique. I've certainly learned that people think, feel, and approach life in very different ways.
And also the comparisons theory that we work on now by way of social media or other people's successes. And it's so easy to be stressed by somebody else's journey or successes or even image. And I think what I've taken away from this conversation is your ability to get people just to sit and be present with where the thoughts are coming from and why, and then either let it pass or take action. And when your brain's been triggered by all these thoughts of I'm not good enough, or they're better than me, or he's told me something that I don't like, that framework of being present, make a good choice and enjoy being you is one that I would definitely take away from this conversation and apply more.
It's been a pleasure, Chris.
I appreciate you, Simon. I know from experience of testimonials of others that you really are delivering some great impact to both young children playing football right at these formative aspects of their adulthood, and also more senior adults that are still facing into everyday challenges. So I appreciate you for all that you do, and carry on doing what you do, because I can clearly see that you are good at it. And most importantly, you get joy from it. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.